Hello, everybody!
Hello.
Ahoy! Yes, welcome to the Strange Traces Stencils 2022 post digital screening Zoom reception. Which I'm trying to get t-shirts made, but I'm told that there's a character limit, so I'm gonna have to do some workshopping. Yeah. So thank you all for being so prompt and on time. I'm Felix Aguilar Tomlinson. I'm one of the founding members of Strange Trace and will be somewhat emceeing a little bit tonight. We're still, I think, waiting on a couple folks. Possibly, we're just gonna like give a little bit of breathing room because of the the little technology gremlins that can get in the way of these sorts of things. But yeah, so this will be a little bit of like talking back and forth between each other. And if anyone ever has like any questions or like wants to shout something, or like we're talking about something and you want to be like, hey, that makes me think of this, or oh, what do you think about this, or can you unpack that? Please feel free to jump in. This is not like a super formally organized dealy bop. It's just kind of like a celebration of the work we did and also a little get together fun hangout thingamabop. So also soon to be copyrighted. So great. Over, do you know who we might still be waiting on? I know you said Aiden might be coming a little bit late because he's got another screening going on today.
Yeah, I believe Aiden will be here by 5:10 or so.
Cool.
But I feel like we're good to start and Aiden can jump in when they're here.
Amazing. Okay, cool. Yeah, so let's just yeah, like I said, I'm Felix, he, him pronouns. And then I guess the rest of us Strange Tracers can introduce ourselves. Elena.
Hello, I am Elena, also a founding member of Strange Trace, singer and admin making things happen person. Pleasure to see you all today. Clover.
I'm Clover. I don't actually know what else I was supposed to say. But thank you so much for coming here and helping us like bring these works to people. I'm really excited. That's it.
And Carly.
Good evening. I'm Kylie Rockenhauser, she, her pronouns, and very new here and very glad to meet you all. Stencils Live was my first experience, meeting everybody and seeing the works in the thick of it, and I'm so impressed and can't wait to see more. Thanks, everybody.
Ooh, party. Yeah, and so we do have some of our fabulous collaborators in-house with us right now. Starting with Stefanie, do you want to just give a shout out, say hello, and maybe what your involvement is? Or I can give you a slate too. I'm happy to do that.
I'm Stefanie. I am the composer of The Plague Bearer. Yeah, and it was a very awesome experience, like from start to finish. So I'm super happy to be here.
Awesome. Yes, so happy to have you in digitally also, as well as in person earlier this month. Evie, too, also.
Hi, I'm Evelyn Pine, and I'm the librettist of Nada, which was just like a remarkable project to work on. Elena and Felix were both in it, and Felix was in it and directing, and Clover, remarkable music direction and pulling that whole piece together. I do want to say that what is really powerful to me about Strange Trace is how, with, I will say it, an exceptionally small amount of money, you all go insane with creativity, and it is such a pleasure to watch that. I mean, it would be even more pleasurable if more people gave you more money, I'm sure, but it is just incredible how you're like the little opera company that can, despite it all, and it just been an incredible pleasure, and during a pandemic. I'm not even going to go there, but anyhow, bravo.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, it was so great working with Evie too. And yeah, on that point, I mean, like we got started in the middle of the pandemic, which was a lot of like make it happen kind of thing. And I think that that's been one of the most fun things about this collaborative process and stuff is just like how can you make stuff with as little or with what you've been given, you know, with the circumstances and resources that you have. So, Carol, I believe you did some score work on Plague Bearer. Is that right? Or preparing a piano vocal score? Is that right?
Yeah, I made the piano vocal score, which which was not heard in the screening. Although I think there was a glimpse of it on a music stand during the film.
Yes.
There might have been a tiny glimpse of it, but I made the piano vocal score from Stefanie's full score. Yes, we are related. And it was really fun because it was like putting together a little puzzle of, you know, where am I going to put this and how do I make it playable? Because I'm a pianist myself. So I was also like figuring out how to put everything where 10 fingers could get it.
Yeah, that's so cool. I mean, we as the singers spent a lot of time with the piano vocal score, so your work is so greatly appreciated there too. But yeah, I mean, do you mind unpacking a little bit, like what kinds of decisions do you have to make as a reducer of a score into piano vocal?
Well, some of what you have to one of the things you have to decide is what's important and what's not, because sometimes there's too much there for one person's hands. Luckily, I could just text Stefanie whenever I was like, I think I can drop out this part, but I'm not sure. How do you feel about that? Or get some advice, because I would often have to drop things down an octave or pick them up an octave to put them where it was playable. So I had to get it, it was easy to get advice on that. So, and sometimes there were things about, sometimes I had to put bass lines up in the treble clef just because it fit better with how pianists work. So that was sometimes really exciting. And I had to pay a lot of attention to the vocal lines to make sure that I wasn't missing any important cues and that I wasn't putting an important cue 2 octaves down from the singer's note, because that's not as helpful for the singer, or too many octaves up. But it was really fun, and I felt lucky that I was getting a sneak peek at the music before anyone else got to hear it.
Yeah, thank you for that insight. It's really fascinating, and thank you for the octave displacement considerations too. That can be very, very challenging sometimes. Yeah, and now Aiden Feltkamp, one of our fabulous collaborators and librettists, has arrived. Aiden, do you mind introducing yourself?
Hey, so happy to be here and meet all you. I'm a writer living in Jersey City, and opera is my favorite thing to write, but I do write a lot of science fiction and fantasy as well, and poetry, of course. And it was really, really fun collaborating on this piece with Stefanie. This is our first collaboration, and it was just a blast. It's really fun to work together, and she had just so many cool ideas. And the best part was kind of like taking all these amazing ideas and then just like compressing it and funneling it into like a really sleek story that I think really works for opera.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
awesome.
happy to answer any questions about
Yeah.
anything, but that's
Great.
basically me.
Thank you. Yeah. Sorry for the little awkward silence. I missed my unmute button. Yeah. So I want to give the opportunity for the rest of the folks joining us to also introduce themselves. If you feel like it, you can also just like kind of hang out and listen too. So no pressure, but feel free to just like unmute and say like, who you are, where you're calling in from, or zooming in from, and maybe your relationship to the company, how you found us.
You might need to just call on people, Felix.
Well, looks like Douglas is ready. Douglas, do you want to introduce yourself or say something?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I know Evie because she's my spouse, and I've watched her be I've watched her create things over the years and getting more and more wonderful. And this is the first thing that was an opera, and I know she and her composer worked really well together, and just it got better and better and better. And I'm impressed by by the production group. So thank you for putting this all together.
Yeah, cool. Well, thank you for being here, and thank you for introducing yourself, Douglas.
Sure.
Hey there, I'm Gabe. I'm calling in from Bowling Green, Ohio. Know of Strange Trace through family members who are involved. My mom, Evelyn Pine, and I really enjoyed watching all of these operas. It was a wonderful experience. Thank you.
Awesome. Great to have you here. A multi-generational celebration here. That's great. Doria, if I'm saying that right, do you want to say howdy or?
I'm Curtis. Doria's with me. I'm on Doria's Zoom. We're opera fans and friends of many of the people involved in this production, and just here to learn a little bit more and to say thank you and congratulations and show our support and interest. It's been wonderful to chime in, and congratulations to everybody involved.
Yeah, thank you. And we have a new person joining us. Bonnie, do you want to say howdy and maybe where you're calling in from?
I'm calling in from San Francisco. I'm a friend of Evie's, and just wanted to say hi. And
yes.
It was great. It was really wild.
Awesome. Yeah, wild. Definitely. It's a wild ride. Great. Well, thank you all for joining us. So first, I just want to take an opportunity, which I think a lot of folks have done already, and just give a big like celebrative woo hand wiggle to everybody for all of the work that they put into this. I think that this was a very successful event, and I'm just so happy with the work and the final product that we got out. So thank you all for all of the hard work. I really appreciate it. Yeah, wheels. Okay, and so I have a few questions kind of like lined up that I can ask folks to kind of like dig deeper into the pieces. But also, if anyone has any other questions, like I said earlier, that you want to ask, or like something is salient to you that you want to dig deeper on, please feel free to interrupt me. I know Zoom can be hard to find that little bit of space, but I'd rather you take it up than not step up, not step into it. So so that being said. Cool. So I want to start with Evie, actually. Evie, I'm really interested in hearing your vision on. So for me, as the director of your piece, I know that like when we first read your piece, it spoke to me in a very specific way, and kind of it told me a bit of this story, especially as a non-linear, more abstract piece. And then through the rewrites, and as I was making the storyboard, it kind of felt like it became something else to me. And then as I filmed it and edited it, it became very different to me too, and then once I watched it, it was like a completely different show. For you, how did your process of understanding and your conception of the piece change from inception to actually kind of hands off and watching it?
Well, like Aiden, this is my first opera, and I'm a playwright, so it was really fun to wrestle with this psychologist's idea. I mean, that's really why I came to it. This Lithuanian woman psychologist who believed that if things are, you remember what's been interrupted, you forget things once they're not interrupted. And that was the germ. But then Strange Trace, in their genius, hooked me up with Tae Young Ho, who is a Norwegian composer who really brought a big imagination as well as composing brilliance to the game. And so it was really delightful because he and I, once we realized that it would probably be filmed, that we, what were the things we could push on? We discovered that we both loved in theater and opera counting, and that was something that was one of the things that goes on here. I was very interested in playing with the pandemic in a very different way than Stefanie and Aiden, but nonetheless, it seemed like I didn't want to tiptoe around it. I wanted it to be right there. And then I just wanted to look at all the different ways that we either are interrupted or feel interrupted. And I didn't want it to be a piece where at the end, I mean, I just watched this fantastic new production of La Traviata that the SF Opera did. But I didn't want it to be like that, where at the end someone falls on the floor dead and all the emotional links are pulled together. I wanted it to unravel instead of ravel. And fortunately, I was working with a composer who really often has that impulse as well. So that's what I was playing with. And I was playing with the fact, quite frankly, one of the things that really changed the writing a little bit was when I heard these gorgeous voices. I mean, just amazing. A lot of people who aren't here because they're writing postcards to people in Georgia. But the feedback that I've gotten again and again has been on, one, the quality of the acting, but secondly, on just the remarkable singing. And when I heard Joshua, Elena, and Aaron singing some of the language, it really made me open up in a different kind of way. And I think process-wise, that was just really important. I'm sort of babbling, Felix. But,
no, that was that was
yeah.
great. No, thank you. It's I think it's one of those pieces. I like how it reaches everybody and even the same people differently at different points. Like for me, watching the filmed version on the screen versus the digital version once that went live, that idea of like how with interruption, you try to get back, and with the pandemic, you try to get back to where you were, pick up where you'd left off before you were interrupted, but you can never really forget what happened in between either. And sometimes trying to pick up right back up where you started or where you'd left off isn't possible, right? And I think we're all kind of discovering that as we unpack the trauma of the pandemic, right? So. Great. And also it looks like we've got our composer librettist team of here, Lauren Derrico and Josh Brown. Hello, welcome, congratulations. Do you want to say howdy?
Howdy. Thank you. Thanks so much. Yeah, we have our little team.
No, fabulous. Yeah, so we're just kind of going around. I have some like canned questions that I'm just like asking folks, but also it's kind of like open conversation too. If you want to like jump in and say like, oh yeah, that too, that rings true to my experience, like please feel free to jump in too. So Aiden, getting in kind of, I saw you nodding along a little bit to what Evie was saying. Yeah, how did things change for you with your piece? I mean, it was more, I think it doesn't have the kind of non-linearity that I think that Nada has in it, but it has this certain amount of real amount of fantasy and like grand narrative going on that I think it was presented differently in the performed version of it. So how did that change, or just how did your experience change from your conception to actually seeing it getting workshopped and put together?
Yeah. Also, I think one of the major changes in the middle was definitely hearing the singers. Like you had said, like hearing the singers and watching them even perform the libretto in like the table read, for me really informed the kind of revisions I wanted to make. Like I know in Act 1 we took one of the arias and completely just threw it in the garbage and wrote another one because I was so inspired by Francis's work. And so like something like that is so exciting. I love having specific singers to write for rather than like writing into the void and then later singers coming and interpreting it. I think there's something really special about that kind of collaboration. And then in terms of how it changed, I had a really like loose idea for it at the very beginning, and I didn't know how it would work out in terms of linear storytelling or what kind of storytelling we were doing. But I definitely think we erred on the side of kind of like more traditional opera structure for the story, but then kind of all the elements of the story were rather different. Like it was something that you would expect, like a love story, but it really it turns it on its head. Or like, the villains of the piece being, the mayor of the town, which you kind of expect, but then also like this demon that just like is there, and that fantasy element is really like not what you expect in a more realistic fiction piece. And so I think that was really fun, being able to play more and more with like, well, we have this like traditional linear storytelling, but then we're taking the elements and kind of like playing around with them. So I mean, I think it changed a lot. Maybe Stefanie can speak more to this, but I feel like it just got tighter and tighter and tighter as it went on, rather than like, I felt like I had a really loose idea of what I wanted to do, and then just as it went on, it became clearer, if that helps.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Like when I found sort of the folktale that was the genesis of the story, I just had this sort of general idea of like, yeah, there's a village and there's like the spooky demon and you know, there's the infection, and then like there's a hero who emerges who like, you know, is going to solve this problem, and there's a conspirator and all of that. And then I think the great thing was working with Aiden, and I think like without that collaboration, I certainly wouldn't have gotten those ideas to be more like concrete and also more sort of outside of a folktale or an expected thing. Like yeah, there's a relationship and a romance, but and there's like the hero and the villain, but they're all kind of like not your traditional hero and villain, because even the demon is like, well, this is just what I am, and I'm not, you know, I'm not, the demon doesn't think of themselves as evil. They're just there and they're doing what they do in a way. And you know, a romantic couple or non-binary blacksmith and a outcast midwife. So that's kind of like not your usual pairing. Like women don't often get to be the heroes, the action hero. And usually the active hero is very like traditional, like, you know, hero guy, like soldier guy or whatever. And so like just focusing in on like how do we want to have those elements but not have them be like the stereotypical, I think was something that was really exciting to develop as we worked together.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I really liked like that idea of like Marcinia too. I mean, like as, you know, virus, this thing that is alive but isn't, but also like how you used a double, you know, two people being this one character too. And also how that kind of plays into our own experiences, at least my own experience in the pandemic, where it's like, wow, outside is dangerous. Other people are kind of dangerous in that time, especially when things were really intense and we didn't really know what was going on. This idea of like inviting folks in, it could be inviting a person into your home was dangerous. And then that's paralleled by this idea of invite, you know, which I mean is an old trope, but, you know, inviting the plague bearer, the plague, you know, the plague into your home. It was cool.
Yeah, I also really like that was one of my first ideas when thinking about this, is I was like, I want the plague spirit to be voiced by two people, two different voices, because I want that idea that the plague spirit is this amorphous. You can't really say like they're this and not that, or they're only this. Like to have it be this kind of combined sound and combined experience. Because I feel like especially in the beginning of the pandemic, it was really like that. Like we, you know, for a while we were like, you know, washing our groceries, or like, you know, sequestering our mail, because like the research wasn't in on whether it was surfaces or just airborne. And so I like that idea that it was that the spirit would have this amorphous sound, because that you can't really pin down. And I also like the idea that we wouldn't have like a monstrous female or a monstrous male, or that we would have a villain that's not tied to these sort of you know, tropes of evil that are like typical fairy tales too.
And it was like from a playwriting perspective, a way to have shape shifting on stage, because you do have two bodies at least like portraying one character. So you do get to kind of have this, like, when I think about it on stage, it's like, you know, there's one person, but then later you see another completely different person, but it's the same character. And usually don't like get that specifically in opera unless it's like for comedy. But so yeah, that was Stefanie's idea, and I thought that was just so cool. So I was very happy to play with that.
Yeah, like if it was staged, I would love to have seen it like have one singer off stage at times, and then switch which singer is on stage, but then also at times maybe have them both on stage, and like just have that sort of like, you never know how the spirit is going to appear and or sound at any given moment, so you can't ever like anticipate. And it's almost like that horror movie trope of like, what's that shadow over there? Wait, is it the monster? Maybe it's not. I don't know. Could it be something different?
It's kind of John Carpenter, like The Thing a little bit, right?
Yeah.
It could be anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got it. And yeah, and on the note of, yeah, I mean, I remember leaving my mail like in the sun because it was like, oh, sunlight's a good thing to potentially. So
I remember like going to work, and like where I worked at the time, only one of us would go to the office on any given day, and like getting there and like basically like walking in, grabbing a bleach wipe and like wiping down every single surface that I could anticipate ever touching during my day there. And then it was like, oh, you don't actually need to do that, to that like absolute degree where it would be like, you know, I put something on someone else's desk, so I better wipe it down.
Yep. Yeah. Cool. Well, I would love to bring in Lauren and Josh. So like the way that we set this up, there were different project managers for each piece and directors and things like that. So I actually have not gotten a chance to really even talk to Lauren and Josh about their piece. So just on a personal level, selfishly, I want to take up the space to say, like, I was dying so hard. It was the funniest thing I think I've ever seen in a movie theater. I was crying, laughing. It was great. It was so good. Yeah. So I want to start just with so to Lauren, I suppose. I guess my first question is just kind of like what?
Sure.
To expound, the piece had so much clear dramatic motion and arc, and I think it all within the world that you had created very quickly, like right off the bat. Like it told a really great narrative story that felt very coherent, and at the same time was incredibly absurd, right? Where did this idea come from? How did you put this idea of like snakes in a wildfire rolling a hot dog up a hill? Like, there's so many layers that just blew me away.
First of all, that's so kind, because me and Plot sort of have a tenacious relationship. Is that the right word? Tenacious?
Tenuous?
Tenuous, yeah. We have a tough thing going. So that's really kind of you to say, and I really appreciate that. The way that Josh and I really work together is kind of we call it our like bad idea first. And then really what we did with this piece, which was so fun, which also kind of spiritually felt like pushing a hot dog up a hill, was like, how could we make this more like, we have this first weird thing, these snakes that are starving. We're like, what's the next thing that we can do that's like just as wild? And then like, how can we like expound on that and make it even more silly? And silly begets silly. But also for us, something that's really important to us is that like silly also begets like feeling, and somehow like a profound sadness comes out of our silliness, which is what we're kind of always chasing. So yeah, it started with snakes and it ended with sadness for us, which feels accurate. Does that feel
Doesn't
accurate?
it always in the end? I mean,
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. And so Josh, the musical style and aesthetic of this piece was super engaging and a lot of fun and just full of like high energy. There was a lot of like pop, and it seemed, kind of like Latin jazz kind of influence in this. I guess like what kind of like drove your musical aesthetic for this piece, or how did you approach the snakiness of it?
Yeah. Well, it's a good question. In starting again with the bad pitch first idea, I was like, what if they're rattlesnakes? And what if that, like latching onto whatever sort of the most obvious kind of sound thing is, and then sort of like pulling back and being like, okay, what do I really mean by like, oh, the rattle of a snake, whatever. And so basically it came together like 3 weeks over Christmas last year, just all at once. So I was really like waking up at 7 a.m., getting to my little computer with a little cinnamon roll and like a huge cup of coffee, Irish coffee, and like composing for 4 hours or 5 hours. And so like to be able to do that and still have fun with it in such a crunched amount of time, I was like, let's have fun. So every time I like made a little rhythm that I liked, or whatever that was really sort of energizing the compositional process, I was like, let's keep doing that. So that ended up being a lot of like fun rhythmic elements and a lot of kind of like pseudo melodramatic kind of spotlight on me aria moments. So yeah, it was just sort of, again, writing that fun, absurdist kind of tale.
Yeah, we believe all opera should bop. That's one of
That's
our new core beliefs
Yeah,
that
yeah.
feel right. So it's always about that. It's always
sure.
how weird, how much of a bop, how sad,
How sad.
how sad.
Yeah. How sad we can get them in the end.
Yeah,
but, like,
exactly,
not
exactly.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So it has to like jam, but then you're like, oh, I'm why am I
Yeah, so
That's
some
my
deep
goal.
Yeah.
some deep cut Strange Trace lore. We were almost called Bopera or Opera Bobopera because of that idea of we like bops. So,
It's
fun
true.
fact. Yeah. Awesome. So those are kind of my canned questions. Does anyone have questions for either any of our collaborators, for each other, for any of us, like us Strange Tracers? I mean, Clover did directing and editing and video editing and also sound editing on everything. I did some directing, acting, and singing and video editing. And then Elena also did directing and singing and stuff. So if you have any questions about that too. Oh, and Clover also trained the snakes. Yeah, so I don't think we're actually allowed to say that out loud, OSHA stuff, but yeah. Anyways, spaghetti approach. Anyways, anyone have a question? Save me from that bad joke.
Well, I just want to say that I hadn't seen really any of the film of The Plague Bearer before the little tiny bits I saw in the trailer and then the screening, and there was, when you have a traditional narrative, like there are just so many ways it could go, like super literal, super realistic, super out there, abstract, and I just really loved the way it looked. Like, Elena, that was amazing. I thought I really liked the way, to me, it seemed to have a little bit of aesthetic similarity to like some silent film aspects, which I thought was really cool. And that like backlit view of the two Morsinia singers, like I knew what it was, and I knew that it was coming, and I was still like, oh, creepy. Like, I was still creeped out by it, even though like it wasn't a surprise. Like, it looked so cool and creepy. So I was just like really impressed, because I didn't know which direction it would go in, and that was really cool to like have that and sort of have elements of something I spent so much time on still be surprising or like refreshing to me.
I appreciate the compliment, and I want to add to that a lot of especially the visual language and the way that it came together was very much a collaborative process. I cannot claim credit for everything, in part just due to the challenges of me being the sort of lone like Midwesterner in a company of mostly people in the sort of eastern coast area, at least at the time of working. I know not anymore. Felix is coming back and relieving me of that loneliness. But at the time when we were working, I was kind of doing everything from a distance. And so, providing storyboards and giving examples of how I would like to see things come out. But Felix was sort of my man on the ground, so to speak. And so some of those, I would make certain requests and ask, this is how I would love to see it happen. But obviously you're the one who's going to be there with the actors, and you're going to need to make it work. And so if you come up with something that is better for the situation that you find yourself in, then we'll work with that. And that backlit shot was one of those sort of happy accidents of, I gave several suggestions for things, and it came together on the ground in a way that was sort of unexpected and really, really beautiful. And then in a similar fashion with the editing process, Clover was doing a lot of the hands-on editing as I compiled the footage and helped comb through options for sort of B-roll that we could use and other images that we wanted to flash in. And I'm very, very grateful to these two partners in crime, so to speak, to help bring that vision to light. So massive props to them.
I guess not to like talk too much, but like I'm curious as to at what point or what element of it inspired you to use black and white, because I was not expecting that. I was not expecting a completely black and white film, which I think lots of, you know.
Yeah. I think part of it is for my own aesthetic. When I see something that is in color, or first of all, even when you take something to a screen versus live performance, because of the very high quality of technology that goes into our film and television nowadays, there are certain expectations of realism. And so when you don't have a big budget, especially when you're in color and you compare it to the things that you see on television, you're already going to start thinking like, oh, that's not as like high quality or as clear as say something that I'm like watching on the television on a Friday night. And even if you're not thinking about that consciously, there's a little bit of a visual disconnect that happens. And so I had that choice early on of like, do I want to lean into hyperrealism with this and maybe run into some pitfalls of people sort of not having that same sense of suspension of disbelief that they have when they go into a theater? Or do I lean more into some more abstract visual storytelling and retain the sense of like suspension of disbelief, even though it's in a digital format? And for me, the lack of color sort of takes it more into that abstract realm.
Cool.
Yeah, I think what Elena gets into that too is something I think we've discovered a lot is this aesthetic of like being a digital opera company, and what does that mean too? Like this whole for me, I think a lot to what Elena said. I think there's a certain amount of like suspension of disbelief that we afford different types of mediums. Like I think it's like a limited budget or just like kind of like a less intense. Like I buy into theater way like low budget or like community theater way easier than I do for film, and I kind of had to ask myself like, why is that, and like what aspects of that can we try to distill into our works of digital opera to maybe make it to not play with people's somewhat innate responses to like low budget films that they might be a little bit more charitable with so far as suspension of disbelief goes, with theatrical productions, and how do we make digital theater as opposed to like musical movies?
I have to say part of the power for me and a couple of people who've like sent me, their responses was the idea that people weren't in the same room, that performers weren't in the same space, even though in many of these operas, they're dialoguing up a storm. And that I felt was really compelling, because we've just gone through an experience of not being in the same space. And then here we have sort of the Strange Trace artists using that and creating an intense intimacy in some moments in all these operas. And that just to me was very, very cool. And a lot of it, and I'm kind of including the snakes in this, but that the performers were so engaged and so powerful that there was a sense of them being in the same place, even though they were spread across the country. And that was very, because, I mean, the idea that there's the deep feeling that opera has, and how that manages both in terms of the person experiencing feeling and then the person reacting to it, how it has that intensity when there's that much distance is really quite miraculous. So that for me was very cool in watching it.
And I just wanted to jump in and say that actually the snakes were in the same room. We did go through like a very intense quarantine process. Yeah, no, it's true. Like they had to travel here. There was like a whole like testing protocol we went through. It was very intensive. So you're welcome.
Yeah, because Clover couldn't actually be in the same room with them if they both were in the room due to like union guidelines. So it was a lot of just setting them up.
All the hard work paid off, Clover.
Thank you.
You're killing me.
Great. Well, I mean, does anyone else have anything else that they're dying to say or want to open up to folks at all? Or awesome. Cool. Well, thank you. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I just messed that up big time. But before you kind of say goodbye, I just wanted to shout out that if you want to know about our next project, I can tell you about it. It's going to be the weekend before the Super Bowl, baby. The first weekend of February, we're going to be doing an opera called Defensive Holding. It's about football. It's a queer football opera, and it's going to be really, really great. So mark your calendars, not for the Super Bowl, but for the weekend before.
Yeah. And that's one of those cases where we think, what I think is, what kind of topics meet the mostly meet the intersections of our identity as like a digital opera company, a bunch of artists who went to music school and things. We thought football would be the perfect encapsulation of that distillation of all of our personal life experiences and things. But no, it's going to be a lot of fun, and it'll be very similar in vein to our Stencils shows. So you can expect.
And I'll jump in and note that for those who have been keeping up with us for a little while, Defensive Holding was originally going to be a part of the Stencils Festival. And we, as you know, again, keeping up with us, we originally planned for Stencils to be earlier this year, ran into some significant issues, and Defensive Holding was the sort of worst sufferer of unexpected issues. But, rather than running away from that, we grabbed the bull by the horns and think to ourselves, well, what would be the best time that we could put this up if we want to give ourselves some extra time? Thematically, weekend before the Super Bowl is the perfect time to do it. So,
which we learned is in February, so that'll be great.
we are learning a lot as our artistic folk who are not super sports ball inclined. So we join us as we learn more about football for the next 2 months, and maybe even make some predictions about who's going to win.
Yeah. Maybe.
Or play, because we now know that they have not announced the teams.
So it's a lot of fun. The music is fabulous. It's really catchy. It's a really great story. The libretto is all based around this poetic form of a sestina, which is a really kind of a really funky, cool poetic form. I really dig it. So cool. And then also the streaming is still going to be available for folks. We'll have a new ticket system if people still have friends or family that they're like, hey, I liked this thing that we watched and we'd love for them to see a little bit more of this. They can still buy tickets to watch the digital screening, which has just been put into the chat, which we'll also put in the little. But no, that's just in the chat. So there you go. And then also for folks who might be watching from home, this is a little bit this is being recorded for folks who maybe bought a ticket and then like just couldn't attend this. For folks at home who also might want to donate to Strange Trace to see us make more of this work and help prop up voices of more fabulous composers, librettists, and collaborators like the ones that we've gotten to meet today, please go to our website, www.strangetrace.org, and perhaps give us a sustaining donation or a one-time donation. That'd be great. So yeah, thank you all for coming. It's been a lot of fun.